first thing I saw was my dock hanging in midair. Not over water, over cracked, stinking mud. Scout was already growling at the exposed shoreline as three guys in neon vests hammered stakes into what used to be my lake. A metal pipe jutted from the bank, spewing a thin stream into the dry gully like a vein someone had cut on purpose. "Hey, who authorized this?" I shouted. One of them didn't even turn around. "HOA orders, sir. Phase 2. I pulled out my phone to film, and that's when a white SUV with a state seal rolled up to the trail and stopped. Brad Whitmore didn't ease into his power, he weaponized it. The moment I walked into the HOA office with my photos, he snatched the folder off the table, flipped through 2 pages, and pushed it back like it was junk mail. "Mr. Hargrove," he said, tapping his tablet, "your obsession with the lake is becoming disruptive." That was his first move. Control. No questions, no investigation, just dismissal. When I reminded him I'd spent 20 years managing dams and reservoirs, he didn't blink. "We're modernizing," he said. "Drainage optimization, efficiency. Residents want progress." That was his entire personality, condensed into one-line: progress at any cost. Then came the action he's now infamous for. He opened a violation form right in front of me, typed my name at the top, and said, "If you continue spreading hostile claims, we'll escalate enforcement." Just like that, retaliation disguised as procedure. I stepped outside, heart hammering. Behind me, through the office window, I saw him lean toward Linda, whisper something, and smirk the smug certainty of a man who believed he ran this town. But he didn't notice the SUV parked across the street, the same one with the state seal on the door. The first violation arrived before sunrise, an orange notice slapped onto my door so hard it rattled the hinges. Unmaintained perimeter edging. I stared at my hedges, trimmed cleaner than a parade ground mulch, fresh stone borders aligned like they'd been measured with a ruler. It was laughable, and that was the point. By noon, a new HOA newsletter hit my inbox. Water optimization, Phase 1, complete. They showed a smiling photo of Brad beside a trimmed hedge, pretending the disappearing lake was intentional progress. I walked the trail with Scout that evening, watching the waterline withdraw like it was afraid of something. Dead reeds leaned forward into empty space. A heron circled once, unsure where to land. That's when I found the second pipe thinner, newer, hidden behind a ring of caution tape that hadn't been there yesterday. Someone wasn't slowing down. Someone was accelerating. And the HOA wanted me too busy fighting fake yard violations to notice the lake bleeding out under our noses. 2 days later, trespassers showed up, clipboard guys in neon vests walking straight across my lawn like it belonged to them. No knock, no notice. Just boots on grass and measuring tapes flicking open. "Hey," I stepped out onto the porch. "This is private property." One of them didn't even look up. "HOA survey," he said, marking a stake near my dock. "Per president approval." Behind him, a chainsaw sputtered to life, clearing brush along the trail without a single posted permit. The workers moved with corporate confidence, the kind that said someone powerful told them not to worry about consequences. I filmed everything. Brad responded by cutting the microphone at the next HOA meeting the moment I stood. "We're short on time," he said loudly. Comments closed. But the projector behind him still displayed my submitted request for agenda time, time-stamped and ignored. That night, Scout paced the back door, ears pinned. I followed his gaze to the shoreline where fresh tire tracks cut through the mud, leading directly to the newly widened trench. The HOA wasn't surveying. They were expanding. The lake didn't just shrink now, it sagged, buckled, collapsed inward like something sick. And the smell? A thick, sour rot rising from exposed muck. The first dead fish appeared near my dock, a silver belly reflecting the morning sun. By the end of the week, dozens floated along the northern cove. Teenagers in orange vests arrived with nets and garbage bags scooping the bodies like they were cleaning up after a storm the HOA refused to acknowledge. Then my bench, the cedar, one I built with my wife, was vandalized. Spray paint, slurs, ugly words smeared across the grain. A violation notice was taped to my door, the same day, distribution of unsanctioned materials. Level 1, warning. Except I hadn't distributed anything. The second notice was worse, disruptive behavior at official meetings, $250. The third nearly made me laugh, unauthorized landscaping modification. They fined me for the yard they claimed was unmaintained 2 days earlier. Total $750, due in 15 days. I filed appeals with time-stamped photos, meeting transcripts, bylaw excerpts. A week later, a new letter arrived, repeat offender status. Accelerated enforcement pending. I didn't need the state investigator to tell me what this was: retaliation disguised as paperwork. but the dead fish lining the shore said something even louder. The next escalation didn't come in paper form. It came dressed in navy blue uniforms. 2 private security guards, HOA hired, not police, stood on my porch holding a cease and desist letter. Scout barked until the windows vibrated. If you distribute one more document, the taller guard said, the HOA will report you to municipal code enforcement. For what I asked, neither answered. They simply stepped off my property like they expected it to explode. A few hours later I learned why. Dana called, voice tight. Brad came to my house, she said. Told us you were unstable. Said you were spreading dangerous misinformation. So the HOA had moved from fines to character assassination, and still, the lake kept falling. That afternoon, a white SUV with a state seal rolled slowly down the trail. A woman stepped out, boots sinking into the mud, clipboard in hand. She didn't knock on my door. She didn't look at me. She went straight to the drainage pipe. And she took photos. The collapse came fast. A child on the north side touched the water during a walk and ended up in the ER with a rash. The HOA called it coincidence. The parents didn't. Then came the algae bloom, a thick green sheet swallowing the remaining shallows. Joggers crossed the street to avoid the stench. Birds refused to land. The trail emptied. Someone launched an anonymous digital survey. Do you trust the HOA's handling of the lake? 80 responses in 2 days. 72 said no. Brad sent out a panicked email blaming climate cycles. But residents had eyes. That night I opened a filing cabinet in my garage and pulled out a sealed manila envelope. Inside was every piece of evidence I'd collected: soil readings, erosion marks, flow measurements, contractor sightings, photographs, timestamps. I mailed it to the State Environmental Protection Bureau, registered, certified, not out of anger, out of inevitability. Because the lake wasn't the only thing being drained anymore. The HOA's control was too. And once the state opened that envelope, there would be no turning back. The emergency HOA meeting was already standing room only when I walked in. Folding chairs packed the clubhouse, residents crowding the walls, the air thick with unease. Brad paced near the podium, jaw, tight eyes flicking toward the door every few seconds like he expected reinforcements. He didn't get them. Let's begin, he said, forcing a smile. The projector lit up with a blue bar graph labeled Annual Rainfall Oak Hollow. As you can see, the lake's decrease aligns with regional weather trends. Murmurs. A few raised eyebrows. I lifted my hand. Brad hesitated, then nodded, as if granting a favor. Yes, Mr. Hargrove. That chart shows rainfall, I said, not water displacement. Do you have any hydrologic data on the lake volume since your drainage project began? Silence. Then a weak laugh. We're not hydrologists, Mr. Hargrove. We trust the experts we hired. Outsource environmental solutions, I asked. The landscaping crew that installed the pipe. Gasps rippled across the room. People turned toward the stage. Before Brad could answer, the back doors opened. Elaine Turner, the state investigator, stepped inside, took a seat, and folded her arms. Brad saw her, and for the first time since this began, he looked afraid. Elaine stood without being asked. I'll clarify, she said, voice steady. The state has reviewed preliminary findings. None of the drainage work was permitted, none were engineered, and none were disclosed in public minutes. The room erupted. Not shouting, realization. A collective exhale of people connecting the final strand. Brad gripped the podium. We acted on professional guidance. Let's discuss that, Elaine cut in. She clicked her own USB into the projector. A scanned invoice appeared on the screen. Install 6-inch steel outflow pipe per President Whitmore's instruction. No permit required per client. Target release 150,000 gallons. Brad's face drained of color. And this, she added, clicking again. A photo of the trench time-stamped. And this. A lab report showing nitrogen and phosphorus spikes. And this. Satellite imagery showing the shoreline withdrawal week by week. Residents murmured, shifting, whispering with growing anger. Someone near the front stood. You told us this was natural variation. Another raised her hand. My daughter had an asthma attack because of the smell. A man spoke up. My property value dropped 12 grand. Elaine didn't need to direct traffic. The evidence was a landslide, the kind no one could outrun. And somewhere in the back I saw Brad's last defense snap. He wasn't fighting anymore. He was sinking. The judge's ruling came 10 days later. No theatrics, no ceremony, just the cold precision of accountability. The HOA board sat at a long table, shoulders stiff. Brad wasn't there. He'd hired an attorney and vanished across state lines, leaving his board to answer for everything he'd ordered. Elaine presented the violations. The state attorney outlined the risk to public health. My testimony finished the arc, simple, factual, unavoidable. When the judge returned glasses low on his nose, he didn't bother clearing his throat. I find the Oak Hollow HOA in violation of state environmental regulations, county permit codes, and its own governing charter, he said. Effective immediately, all modifications to the lake cease. A civil fine of $85,000 is imposed. A state-supervised restoration is required within 12 months. A full HOA board election is mandated within 45 days. The gavel struck once. A single clean sound. Final. Outside the courthouse, residents gathered in small clusters. No cheers. No jeers. Just a long, relieved breath shared by people who finally felt the weight lift. One man approached me quietly. "You saved the lake." I shook my head. "No. The lake saved us." He smiled anyway. And behind us, the courthouse doors closed on the old HOA forever. The morning after the ruling, the neighborhood gathered along the lake trail, not for a meeting, not for a protest, but because people finally wanted to stand together again. The interim board had already taped a notice at the clubhouse door, announcing the audit of old violations, the reversal of improper fines, and the opening of the special election. Residents clustered in small groups, trading quiet apologies and stories they'd kept to themselves for too long. Mrs. DeMarco approached first hands, clasped voice soft, as she admitted she'd been scared to speak. Jorge held a stack of photographs of his towed car and shook his head with a tired smile when I told him restitution was coming. Even the Crawfords, who rarely left their porch, walked the trail with a steadiness I hadn't seen in months. Conversations weren't about blame anymore. They were about cleaning up debris, pulling dead reeds, and planting new grasses, tangible fixes, not arguments. For the first time, the lake didn't feel like a battleground. It felt like common ground again. State crews arrived by mid-morning with equipment that finally matched the seriousness of the work ahead. Their trucks lined the road, water quality units, shoreline, restoration trailers, erosion control rigs. Elaine stepped out with a clipboard and boots still muddy from her last site check. She didn't give a speech. Instead, she gathered the supervisors, pointed to the damaged inlet, and issued clear directives about soil removal and bank stabilization. Residents stood nearby, watching the process unfold, not as bystanders, but as witnesses reclaiming their place in the community. No one interrupted, no one argued. When the first section of illegal piping was cut apart and lifted out, people actually exhaled. It wasn't triumph, it was release. The state briefed the interim board on the restoration schedule, while volunteers organized themselves into work groups: invasive removal, path, cleanup, native plant installation. Dana brought a folding table and set out water jugs, sandwiches, and a stack of gloves. Children traced patterns in the returning mud, while adults marked future planting spots with small wooden stakes. Step by step, the lake shifted from evidence of damage to evidence of repair. And through it all, the air once thick with algae and tension carried something cleaner. When the state attorney arrived with the compliance packet, the legal consequences became tangible. The $85,000 fine would be divided between state penalties and a dedicated restoration fund managed under supervision, not by the HOA. All pending violations issued under the previous board were suspended immediately, subject to review. Residents who'd been ignored, fined, or intimidated finally had an official channel for correction, and the relief showed in the way people carried themselves. The interim board confirmed the election schedule, opened nominations within the week voter list, posted publicly ballots verified by a third-party mediator. Several residents stepped forward to announce candidacies based on transparency, environmental stewardship, and open communication. No one mentioned the old board. No one needed to. The shift wasn't about replacing faces. It was about replacing the culture that had let one man act unchecked. As the attorney explained, the oversight terms, monthly reports, public posting of expenses, restoration updates, I watched neighbors lean closer, not out of suspicion, but out of hope. Accountability wasn't an idea anymore. It was the new operating system. As the afternoon stretched into early evening, the work softened into something quieter. Flowers were placed along the shoreline's edge, where the grass had been scraped raw. Children wrote small chalk messages on the path: keep it clean, help the water, the lake matters. Dana sat beside me on the rebuilt bench, handing Scout a biscuit, while the wind moved lightly across the water. The surface, though, still scarred, showed the first hints of clarity, returning a faint ripple glinting where light met new depth. Volunteers lingered, sharing food and stories under the shade of tall oaks, waiting for the last state truck to pull out. No one rushed to leave. The lake, even in its wounded state, pulled people back to each other. When Elaine finally approached, she gave a single nod that carried more weight than any speech. "It'll come back," she said. "It'll take work, but it will." She glanced at the volunteers still kneeling in the mud planting reeds. "Looks like you've already figured that out." The sun dipped low, turning the water gold. For the first time in a long time, it felt like the lake was listening again. And when Scout lowered his head to the surface, the ripple he made looked like the beginning of something we'd finally earned.